have no clue why. That thing screwed right together on the first round.
That's the worst thing to say in this position, bud.
The challenge is with this toilet, you can't just pull it without doing a lot of work in the tank. Manufactured May 15th, 1928. We have to like turn the water off, pull the tank off. That is taking a lot more effort than I would have hoped. Separate the tank from the bowl, then we can actually pull the bowl. These old toilets, water will kind of hide in places. All of this to replace a wax ring that probably costs like $5. I have no fucking idea. The concerns that the customer has is that when they flush it, they get some drips of water down on things in the basement. So I've already checked it out down in the basement, and there's old lead piping and everything else, so that's always a possible who knows what's going on. But all the drips seem to be coming from up above the floor, which would indicate bad wax ring. The challenge is with this toilet, you can't just pull it without doing a lot of work in the tank. Manufactured May 15th, 1928. Like just this piece is super valuable. You never know how these are gonna come apart. You never know how they're gonna go back together. And then for it to be in black is even more rare. When I was buying the parts to do what we need to do today, the guy was like, don't break that. You're gonna shit when you find out how expensive that is to replace. So the water line actually comes through the wall inside the tank. So we have to like turn the water off, pull the tank off to separate the tank from the bowl. Then we can actually pull the bowl. All of this to replace a wax ring that probably costs like $5. We've got all the pieces to pull it apart and put it back together as long as nothing else breaks. New closet bolts and caps that are black because right now they're missing. And these are the new nuts and seals that we should need. Everything else shouldn't break. And then new brass screws to secure it to the wall. Come on. So we got one to loosen out. That's good. I have to get the nut connected to the pipe off, and then I can loosen the other one and take the whole thing out. But I can't do that until this nut breaks free. We'll have to keep tinkering with that part. It's wanting to rotate all the threads and everything that are in there. So I've had to change strategies now because I can't get that apart. So now I gotta pull everything off without pulling the tank off the wall 100%. I've got to pull the flush valve assembly out. So the fill valve hangs from here, but it's got a union that I'm gonna try to break loose so we can get the fill valve out of the way. And then if the fill valve's out of the way, we should be able to get the tank off the wall fairly easily. The thing that we have to be careful of is we don't want anything rotating that's not supposed to be rotating. That is taking a lot more effort than I would have hoped. I really need that off of there in order for me to lift this tank off. I think I need to cut one of these fittings off, but before I do that, let's go to the truck and grab the pieces that I've come for with this thing. We'll also grab a real flashlight instead of a phone. Holy cow.
Got it!
Got like twine. Make one little cut and now everything comes off, right? I'm willing to bet that my sucker gun is not in these trucks. We need to drain all the water out of here. So my service van is no longer a service van. It's been repurposed to our install van for the sump pump program. But it doesn't have all the stuff we need for this. That was what we needed. Aha! When you flush the toilet inside there, you're picking this up and that ball opens up and lets all the water go down that hole, right? But then the toilet has an internal overflow too, so if the valve doesn't shut off for some reason and the water gets too high in the toilet, it'll just go down this hole and still make its way into the bowl. That's how they used to do it 100 years ago. Now all this stuff is plastic and all of that, which isn't a bad thing because plastic doesn't rot and it doesn't corrode. So you don't run into issues getting things apart today like you used to because you don't have to worry about all this corrosion. We will do what we can to try to get this out of here. If we can, great, then we have to clean this up, get the surfaces smooth so we can put it all back together and it won't leak. And I've got the new gaskets and rings for the top and bottom here. A lot of that's gonna depend on if this even comes out. I'm almost wondering if they didn't try to solder this or something to put that together. These old O-rings, if you touch them, they'll turn your fingers black. and then it just goes everywhere. See how it's leaving black smears on my tool even. So we try to not touch them because it gets just to be a massive mess. Gasket to replace that one. I had to cut the upper nut off today. Somebody had to cut the lower one off, and you can see where they almost went too deep. So the reason I'm doing it this way instead of grabbing it and twisting it around like that, I don't want to put too much pressure on this. I'm trying to smooth it up, but I don't want to gouge this into there or anything else. Feels pretty good all the way around. Once we've drained the water out of the bowl, then we can pull the toilet and replace the wax ring. So look at the shape of the old toilet. Had an extra bump out for guys.
For guys.
You know what I mean. Moment of truth. Excuse me, fellas. That was probably a pricing sticker at one time. These old toilets, water will kind of hide in places. See what I mean? Water kind of hides everywhere. As you move the toilet around, lean it forward, lean it back, you get more water that comes out of it, so you kind of have to be careful that you don't dump water all over the floor. Clean it up nice and well. See the black even coming off from that rubber there. That's why we try to avoid touching the rubbers. We never really know what we're getting into with these until we pull the toilet. You can't replace the standard wax seal. You have to use a new one every time you pull the toilet. We're always looking as to why is this one leaking? And one of the things that we're seeing, we see all the black residue around here. And that is an indicator of where water has been traveling across the wax. Back here, we've got some black trails that are going outside the wax. Thank you, sir. Early indicators are that our flange is still in good shape and all of the old piping underneath it is still in good shape. We always get a little worried whenever we pull a toilet and we don't see any black on the wax, because that usually means the wax ring was not leaking, it's leaking from somewhere else. Hopefully it's gonna stay at just a wax ring replacement and not anything further.
Dang, look at that stuff. It looks like it's tough.
It is. The new wax ring as well. Now, we will pull these old bolts out because we're going to replace these. Back in the old days, they used lead piping to make these final terminations, and so that they would, down in the basement, they would use somebody's flushed toilet. Sewer lines echo really, really well. If we had another toilet pulled in this house, we could actually talk to each other through the drain lines with ease. It's like a giant game of telephone. Down in the basement, you would have cast iron lines, but then to make the final connections between the cast iron and the toilets, they would use lead piping. Cast iron's great, but it's gonna get you within 4 to 6 inches. It's not gonna get you those final, precision measurements. And so they would use lead because you can bend it and mold it and make it work for what you got going on. But then they would actually solder or join the lead to this brass flange that's here in the floor. You can see some of the soldering that they've done there. So down on this side over here, you can see where the sink actually runs into it. If I were to turn this sink on, you'll probably see water come out that hole here in a second. If it's not the sink that's connected to that, it's going to be some kind of vent that's connected to it. So it looks like that's a vent, no water came out that pipe. So a lot of times the sink would also connect to that, and they would be like dual purpose. They would vent the toilet with the sink drain. So here's more of this bad wax, and you can see how greatly discolored it is. The wax should be an amber color, and whenever it's brown and black like that, that's the sign of corroding wax. It's the sign that water has been traveling across that wax for quite some time. Because the toilet drain hole lines right up with the piping, most of the water will just fall out and go right into the drain. But you do get some splash, from time to time, and that splash is what's eroding away at that wax. So now we grab our tape measure and we measure how deep the recess is between here and the floor. And it looks like we are right at a 1/2 inch. Okay, this actually sticks below the floor, which is part of why this thing wasn't leaking as bad as it is. Modern day toilets, this horn of the toilet does not stick super deep below the floor. This drops below the floor a 1/2 inch, but the finished floor is 1/2 inch, okay? So what that means is when we set our wax on the flange, we need to make sure we have well more than a 1/2 inch above the finished floor. Here is our wax ring with horn. Again, it's got this plastic horn in it that's gonna help direct things down through the floor. You can see a funnel there, and then if I flip it around, you don't see much of it because it's all embedded in the wax, right? And then we can measure what we have coming up above the floor. We are right at a little less than an inch above the finished floor right now. So if we were to set a toilet on this right here, it would squish a little bit, a 1/2 inch maybe. We want a lot more than that. If we can get 3/4 of an inch of squish, that's really good, because as it squishes, take that wax, right? It's kind of dome shaped. As it squishes, it also flattens out. So not only does your seal get stronger, the more squish you have, the seal gets wider all the way around. You don't want to use too much wax though. If you use too much, as it squishes out, it'll actually go into the hole and clog on the hole a little bit. Sometimes it can squeeze out the sides of the toilet, so you don't want to use too much. Another thing that's a pretty popular debate, everyone seems to have a differing opinion on where the surface of this flange should be. Some people want the surface of the top of the flange to be at finished floor or above. Some people are okay with it being below. When we have it below, there's another popular discussion of stacking wax rings to make up the distance, or raising the height of this flange. If it's a PVC flange, we're usually raising the height of the flange. But raising the height of this flange is incredibly difficult in this old house, and there's no really good way to seal a new flange to this old flange. So we're gonna stack wax rings on this one. And if you do it properly, it's no big deal. There's a couple different logics for how to stack wax rings. If you're stacking two non-horned wax rings together, I'll usually stack them together and kind of massage them together with my fingers. Sometimes you can wear a glove when you do this too. I'm just gonna clean my hands when I'm done. If you're doing one with a wax ring with horn, you can stack this one on top of this one and massage them together. Another way to do it, and it's a lot cleaner of a way to do it, instead of doing it that way, you put the new one without the horn under the other one. And so that way we don't even really need to do a lot of massaging together, because the horn bridges the gap. And then when all of this squishes together, everything's gonna seal up nice. We'll just apply some pressure, put them together like that. We set it down. Now we're gonna get tons and tons of squish, okay? Another benefit to doing it this way though is the horn will help ensure that the opening in the toilet stays open. We've been kind of eyeballing this job for a while. It took us a little while to round up parts. It wasn't leaking horribly in the basement. But one of the things I noticed whenever I was out here the very first visit was the old toilet did not have bolt caps on it. It's just kind of ugly in this super fancy bathroom where they've done a really good job of keeping everything nice. And you got rusty toilet bolts down there. So we are gonna replace the bolt caps. A lot of people don't know what these little plastic things do, but those plastic things help keep your closet bolts in position and standing upright. If we just stick a closet bolt in here, it's gonna wanna fall over and lean over and all kinds of things and go where we don't want it to go. They give you these little plastic gripper sliders. They go down the closet bolt and help hold it in position. We can set our toilet on there, and then we can put on our washers and our nuts and our closet bolts. We don't do windows though. So you can take that. I'm just glad our toilet tank hasn't fallen off the wall. Oops, that ain't good. That isn't good at all. Our closet bolts aren't long enough. Bummer. So we need new wax rings because, like I said earlier, once you squish one, they're done. But our closet bolts that our little black caps go on aren't big enough. So I'm gonna go to the truck and see if I've got closet bolts that will fit these special nuts that go on to hold the caps in place. If not, I don't know how we're gonna do this. We might just have to improvise with something else. Let's go find out. Oh yeah.
Money?
Yep. So our standard long closet bolts will work. Perfect. That's what we want. So now we gotta get some new wax rings because we've ruined the other ones. In this endeavor of learning.
Dang, that thing's still on this truck?
Yeah, you guys haven't done your jobs.
Right.
Guys. What's going on? Yeah? Shocked, I know, right? All right, come on back up. So no wax stuck on the bottom of the toilet, but you can see what kind of squish we got by stacking the wax rings like we did. We got a really good seal all the way around everything. That's exactly what we want. You know, there's a lesson around every corner, and this was, we didn't intend on pulling the toilet back, but with these bolts being too short, we kind of had to. But you can actually see how good of a squish we got through all of that. And you can see how the wax ring with horn being on top is now pushed to below the level of the flange. So that would have been a very good seal that would have lasted many, many, many years.
Sure.
You guys know how to tell the difference between good toilet wax and bad toilet wax? Good toilet wax tastes like wax. Bad toilet wax tastes like shit. This one does not smell like We're gonna be able to use these guys in here, and these are for sure long enough, but we lost our little plastic grippers. So lucky for us, we have extra washers and nuts. So we can actually use all of that to mount these. Did the same thing last time. A lot of times we just let the weight of the toilet do its thing and squish it down. And once it goes down, we don't want to pick it back up. In a warmer climate, they squish down nice and easy. In a cooler climate, those wax rings get real cold and real stiff. So sometimes you have to run them under warm water to get them up to temperature a little bit so they squish easier. You know, another plumber trick is whenever they're heading to a job where they know they're going to be dealing with wax rings, they'll grab a couple out of the back of the truck and put them on the dash and run the defrost to get them to warm up a little bit. I'm actually not going to bolt the toilet down just yet because I might need a little bit of twisting ability as I am getting all this put back together. This guy is going to go back into the toilet. We'll be good to roll with this guy here. Just fitting some of this stuff in here gets to be kind of a challenge. There we go. Drop that down through the hole. Straighten our flush rod back out that we had to bend a little bit to make things work. Get to work down here and piece some of this stuff together. And the first thing that goes on is our flanged ring that mounts the flush valve to the tank. So going back, we've got brand new nuts. We knew that these nuts might be an issue. I knew I would have to probably cut them off. But then we also have friction rings that will let these nuts get nice and tight without damaging our rubber. And then we have our rubber seal. The first thing that goes on is the rubber seal. And we're just kind of loading this up right now. We're not actually putting things in their final places just yet because we kind of have to load this up before we can stack everything together. Then our friction ring goes on. And slides up. And then that nut. And now we have to put that on in reverse order so that we can load up everything for the bottom half. The first thing to go on is the lower nut, then the friction ring, and then the lower rubber. Now we can kind of set everything in place and start assembling everything. And remember, I still haven't bolted our toilet bowl to the floor yet. And it's because we might have some little shifting and stuff that we have to do to get these seals right. Gravity largely holds the toilet bowl where it needs to be. Everything else we're doing with it just secures it from getting bumped or twisted or moved, so. Now watch we go downstairs, and this whole time we've just been flooding the basement. So that should be it, but now we gotta turn the toilet back on, let the tank fill, and make sure we don't have any leaks. I'm gonna go ahead and get our toilet bolted to the floor. And again, gravity's holding most of this in place. We don't need to over tighten these bolts, we just need to get them snug. I've gotta cut off this excess so that my cap can go on there like it's supposed to. Now we take our wet sponge and clean all those shavings up. They just stick to the sponge nice and easy. And then our cap can go on there. Much better looking than the way it was when we showed up. Let us turn some water on and see how many leaks we have. So right now, the tube, there's no water going down the tube. So right now, as we're filling the tank, what we're doing is we're testing the seal from the flush valve assembly down to the tank. So I need to lower the water level, which we do by manipulating this rod. We can bend that rod a little bit and lower the water level. I'll get to that once we're done. Now we're gonna flush it, and we're gonna check a couple of things. We're gonna see if we're leaking here or here. We're also gonna see if we're leaking at the base. See, we got water coming out of here. And that is water emerging from here. It's not running down anywhere. Feels like we're good. Maybe we just didn't get this tight enough. The threads are a little boogered and there's a little bit of grime on those threads, so it could be making us think that it's tighter than it actually is down there. We definitely did not get it tight enough the first time. Yeah, just strip them out. First things first, let's get this water level to where it's actually going. That's not supposed to happen. Well, we're gonna have to make a run to a supply store and get that replaced. Glad it didn't cut me. Or I may be able to salvage enough threads. With this old stuff, you never know what you're gonna get. And let's be honest, we're really glad that broke in my hands here instead of broke afterwards. Because what this is what runs the level in the tank. You have this rod screwed into the fill valve, and then the higher the water level gets, the more it closes the valve. And so where it broke, it's always under tension. And granted, I was trying to bend it, I was putting it under more tension than it normally is, but we've seen these break and rot off, be sitting there floating in the tank like this, and the toilet's running 24/7, and we show up to the house after the toilet's been running for several hours. So if it's gonna break, we're glad that it does it in our hands instead of somewhere else. So here's where the rod broke, right? But we still have good usable threads there. And another thing we can do is the other part of the rod just goes onto this ball. We improvise with some of this older stuff, right? Now these rods are not overly hard to find. They're fairly common. But because one end just goes into this ball, we can actually flip it, screw this end into the ball. The rod's gonna be a little bit shorter from here on, but it'll still work, and it'll still work really, really well. So there it is, screwed into the ball. It's not gonna go anywhere. Now we can screw this end back into where we were, make our adjustments, get everything where it needs to be, and it'll still function just fine. Let's put our jam nut on there. To get everything put together, I'm gonna take the ball back off for a second. That'll give me the room I need to get the rod screwed. Now we've got that set. Let's see where our water level is now. Water level's not gonna be any higher than where it is. Turn the valve on and we got no water flowing, so that's good. So now let's flush it again and see if we're still leaking. And if we are, we're gonna have to get creative with how that's gonna go together on the bottom. And a lot of times that's what we have to do in this old stuff. Oh yeah, leaking like a sieve. So I just learned we are gonna have to replace that rod. The ball is interfering with some of the linkage and not letting the flapper drop all the way down. So it's already loose as a goose. so the nut's not going on there far enough to grab enough threads. Flush this again. Yep, and just keeps jumping off of there. Hopefully, that lets us get on to more threads before things start trying to... Dang it. So now it's leaking from down on that seal. This is the problems with working with 100-year-old stuff, is you touch one thing, something else leaks. One more time. Boom. So now we're gonna put this guy back on here. It goes small end down. It's very difficult to get onto there. Very difficult. It might not. When do you guys wanna? Nope. Not working? Will it rotate?
Feels like it's gonna break it.
Do all this work, and now it'll start leaking again at the bottom. That's a meaty dang screw. I'm not gonna be able to replace those because the screws I brought are not that large. Keep going. Right there, a little bit more.
You better
Don't
hurry,
don't move. No, we are back where we started. Slid back down. Don't move.
That's the worst thing to say in this position, bud.
Gosh, dang it.
Did it go down?
Yeah. This is just not.
Use the old one.
Well, I'd have to redo every single thing we've done to this point. I'd have to start 100% over to try to see if this ring, a standard toilet, we could have had the thing fully rebuilt 4 times over by now. I don't know what it's going to take at this moment. You're gonna lift and go to the right. Almost like our toilet's sitting higher off the floor now than it was before, or the tank has settled on the wall just a little bit. All right, well, we don't have a choice but to pull everything apart that we've just done and start over. I have no clue why. The thing screwed right together on the first round. I have no idea. Now you can pick up on the tank, wiggle it. Will it not go? No. The tank is hanging on this one. No, not all the way. But like we can't even, we can barely even see the hole. See what we get now. Looky there. It's in. So right there, whenever your plumber says it'll be cheaper to put in a new one, this is what they're talking about. A lot of times we can spend hours rebuilding these old toilets when we can put a new one in an hour. This one, kind of a unique case. See these old school toilet paper holders that are like built into the wall? They don't handle, toilet paper rolls used to not be as thick as they are now. Clean up the floor really good.